Hi there, and welcome to the Blue Envelope podcast Redux, only two of us, set review of Strixhaven School of Mages. We've done these last few sets. If this is your first time joining us, if it's not your first time joining us, thank you very much. We appreciate all the very few viewers we get. But no, we tend to do this because we're both the two limited players of the podcast, whereas Matt and Rob, I suppose, are more traditionally constructed players. But if you're completely new to this, if you don't even know about podcasts, please check that out as well. It's the Blue Envelope podcast, and you'll find it on whatever your podcasting platform of choice is. You can also check out the website tbepodcast.com. We're going to do we change the format up of these reviews each time. We're never quite sure what the best way of doing it is.
We've not settled on one yet.
Yeah, we originally used to go through them card by card, but I think that's basically pointless because most of the cards are like, whatever, it's average. So for this one, we're just going to, because the set is school-based, it's split into these 5 guilds, schools, whatever, they sort of change the name of what they are. Colleges.
They're colleges.
Colleges. That's a UK-American thing, isn't it? I guess we'd call them colleges, wouldn't we? Because it's...
we'd call them universities.
Yeah, but is it that age or is it like high school age?
No, I think it's university age.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So we'd call them colleges within a university, wouldn't we? Whereas I think Americans call them colleges within a school. Whereas for us, a school is more like pre-18. Anyway, that's not particularly relevant. Basically, it's a Harry Potter themed Magic set, and we're going to talk through it.
Nice and on the zeitgeist as usual.
Yeah. It's enough time has passed since Harry Potter that you can now make references to that without seeming to support J.K. Rowling. I think that's what they've gone for. I guess, like I said, we'll go through them school by school, but let's start with some first impressions. I've done a bunch of drafts. I was trying to look at my 17 lands data because Magic is now out on tablets and phones. It doesn't actually record all my data, but 17 Lands has recorded 34 events that I've done. It only came out 2 weeks ago, and I reckon I've done at least half of that again via phone or tablet. So yeah, I've done a lot of drafts at this point. Relatively good result. I think my results are better this time around than for Kaldheim. So I don't know what that says about the set, but I feel like I'm doing quite well at it so far. But I guess if nothing else, it means hopefully I will be able to speak with some authority today. I gather you've been playing a lot of limited as well.
I have been doing, I've done 30 or so drafts and a bunch of seals. So I'm practicing for the Open. My results, I think, have been a bit more varied than yours, but as we were talking about beforehand, my drafting has been a bit more varied than yours. You are very much a... Prismadi, is that what they're called?
Well, I sort of blue-green, red. I sort of like to mix guilds, but yeah, exactly. Teamer, bit of Prismari, a bit of Quandrix. But yeah, I was looking at going down my last decks. I've got blue, red, green with a splash of red, blue, red, green, blue, red, green, black, green, red, white, blue, red, green, blue, red, splash green, blue, red, green, blue, red. It's like just almost mono blue, reds, blue, greens, or a combination of the two.
Whereas I'm just like blue, black,
trying a bit of everything.
White. I've got blue, black draft for some reason. Yeah,
but I do think it's a fun set to draft. I think I've really enjoyed most limited sets in the last few years, but I think this one in particular is a fun set to draft. When it first came out, I sort of declared it immediately like best set ever, and then I went down a bit, but I think I'm back up to thinking it's like definitely top tier. It might not be the best ever, but it's definitely top tier. I think there's a lot of depth to it. The games often have a lot of gameplay, which is obviously a kind of thing. Some people like formats that are just like fast paced and aggressive, whereas I like the ones where games can be swingy, like you can feel like you're losing and then suddenly like, oh wow, I just spun this into a victory.
I'd read the right learn card into the correct lesson out of my sideboard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the fact that you have these lessons as well, I think, I'm sure we'll talk more about the lessons when we're doing the actual sort of set, the school by school thing. But that obviously gives you a lot of, it opens a lot of draft slots. I think any mechanics in a format that let you include more spells in your deck always improves the draft format. So, recently we had the dual face land and spell cards, which meant you could have a deck with like 25 spells in. Whereas
and
normally
also
you only
21
have
lands. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas normally, you'd only have like 23, 17, whatever. And this time you've obviously got the wish board with all the sort of the lesson board. So you have like sort of 4 or 5 functional extra cards in your deck that let you play that without affecting the sort of the 40 card efficiently built deck.
Yeah. I found them very good. Like, I found more and more just like having the one that lets you go and get a land is great. Having the green one that lets you disenchant is great. Just like having the access to them.
Because people, I think, are often drawn to the ones that make creatures. I think are the most solid ones. That they're just like the generic good ones that you always want in your sideboard. But I think people forget that, or people maybe who haven't played constructed with wishes. You kind of want silver bullets with a wish board, don't you? You want, like you said, like the disenchant or the removal. Like, it's not very good removal. It's either 5 mana and they draw a card, or it's 3 mana and they get a 3/2 out of it. But sometimes you just want to destroy a mythic monster and you kind of need that removal in the wish board. So it's better to pick that over just like a generic 5 mana 4/4 spell.
Yeah, it's like, you draw a card. Well, that's fine. Your card's not going to be as good as your mythic your foolish card.
Yeah. But no, it is. I think it's a really interesting mechanic. There is gameplay to it, and sometimes you just want to discard and draw as well, which I think people forget. Because I don't think I've ever seen an opponent discard and draw against me. Like find a random.
Part of the problem with that is on Arena, what they may have done.
It's hard to do.
is it flashes up all the lessons you can get, and because I did this the first time, I was like, I don't want to get a lesson. I want to discard, so I clicked decline, and they just carried on with the game. And I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
What? But it turns out off to the left, you have to click on your hand and then submit the card you want to discard. And I was like, oh, all right then. Turns out I just declined and did nothing with my thing.
I've done the exact same thing because the wording of the learn cards is like, you may, I don't know, I can't remember what it is, but you may find a card, or if not, you may. So I thought, well, if I decline, then it'll give me the option to discard and draw. And then, I declined. It's like, oh, nothing happened. Great.
Yeah, all right. Just gain 4 life.
Yeah.
Your turn.
Yeah. But no, they do add some interesting gameplay.
Yeah, very much so.
But should we jump straight into the first school?
Which college? Which university are we going to first?
So I'm going by the order that they're done on the WotC website. So the first one is Lawhold, which is red white.
See, this is. I'm glad we're doing this one. I like this one.
Okay, for all of them, I'll give a little sort of spiel from the website just to give you a bit of flavour of what they want us to think about them. But Lawhold students are diligent researchers, daring adventurers, and scholars passionate about history. They explore the past by poring over artifacts and summoning long-dead spirits. For some, the past is a rich tapestry for disciplined study. For Lawhold, it's a cape worn as they jump into a forgotten tomb. So this is Lawhold, history and artifacts. I always find these things interesting to read because I'm like, I hadn't really... That's not how I viewed it.
Yeah.
But, so Lawhold's a red-white one. And I suppose
that's like referring to the cards leaving the graveyard mechanic sort of thing
back
that
and
they
forth.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You said you had thoughts on this one, so I'll let you start.
I just find it interesting because like red-white has, for the last however many sets, just been like, we're just about aggro. Bang. That's all I'm about. And most of my Lawhold decks that I've had success with have very much been, I can actually just grind you out and I'm just going to win the long game. Because I've got like a Quintorius, or I've got some little thing that gets a benefit from removing cards from the graveyard. And then I get some minor effect from removing the card from the graveyard, and also make a 3/2, or this guy gets +1/+1, or things like that. And I've just found it really interesting that they've managed to make a red-white. They've been able to make red-white in this where you can actually just like have really grindy games with. I was doing it last night with a couple of the returned pass caller, the 4/2 flyer, and it turns out, if you've got 2 of them, it's like 2 gravediggers, but they've got 4 power and fly. Yeah. So they actually just trade off really well. Rather than being chump blockers that gravediggers are, they actually just trade and then
attack.
And then attack and kill them very quickly when you need to. And obviously, like when you're no longer blocking, you can just be like, all right, play this, get my removal spell back, remove your monster, start getting him for 4. And like it's just been very interesting that they've been able to make it where you can actually just grind it out rather than having to be like... So obviously you can still play the Star Pupil, Eager, first year, I think it is, and the guiding voice, the really good like 1 mana, put a counter on something, learn.
Yeah,
because like that's obviously really good as well. But it's just you can actually just build a red-white control deck and grind it out, and that's been really fun. I've had a lot of fun with Lorehold.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's my first ever experience of the set was doing a sealed deck on Arena, and obviously I hadn't looked at any previews, and so I just like went into it blind, and it happened that all my best rares were in red and white, so I thought I'd play that, even though it's not normally I don't like to play red white for the reasons you said. I don't really like the aggro decks, but it is interesting. The whole time it was like every game was so grindy. I had a bunch of the Pilgrims that find planes, and I had like Lorehold Excavation, just all these like super grindy cards, and Quintoris as well. And the whole time I was like, wow, it's like interesting that they've gone in this direction. Because I don't think any of the other schools have really done that. Like all the other color combinations kind of do exactly what you'd expect that color combination to do in other sets. So it is nice that they've taken the red-white stuff, the Lorehold stuff, and gone, actually, no, we want to do something a bit different with red-white. So yeah, no, I agree. It is fun. It's kind of because of the fact that you can also draft the fast decks. Like you said, I think that does spoil it slightly for me because it sort of dilutes. I think because of that, it's not the most powerful school in the set, and like you need to be. I think it needs to be open to really do well with it. But I do like the fact that you can go one or two directions. It also you can sort of splash. It doesn't combine that well with other schools, but you can have like a sort of black, white, red deck because your deck's a bit slower than it would normally be as a red, white deck.
Yeah. I'm going to say it's interesting because like what ends up happening is you've got cards like, I can't remember its name, the 4/4 for 5 with Vigilance and Menace. And
the Sloth.
And that ends up just sort of like not doing anything because it doesn't fit into either of the two decks really. Because like it costs 5, so it doesn't go in the aggro deck. Advantage. And it doesn't generate you any card. Like a 4/4 Vigilance punter's fine with Menace, but like you sort of want something better than that in your control deck as well. So you often see them going really late in draft because they don't go in either of the things Lorehold's really trying to do, which is really strange because the other one is that you see going. I think Lorehold's just like not very popular because, like I said, it has to be open, and you sort of either the aggressive version or the control version. So, like I said, it seems a bit weaker because unless in the draft all the aggressive cards for Lorehold are open and you get them, you can draft it, or all the control cards are open. But if you get a bit of both, your deck ends up obviously being much weaker. So I think people are not going into Lorehold early, which then means essentially nobody drafts it.
Yeah. I think if you are going Lorehold, I think it's probably the school that makes the most out of learning the lesson cards, just because it has access to the 3 sort of creature spells. So you can play the 3/2 flyer, the 3/2 ground guy, the 2/1 flyer, or the 4/4 for 5. All of those. I think Lorehold's the only. It's the only school that accesses all of them. Yeah, it must be. And they're generally, I think, the strongest ones. You've also got cards like Professor of Symbology, which is like a clean 2 mana, 2/1 learn. You've got Guiding Voice, like you said. You've got the 3 mana red removal spell. As well. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of cards. I think if you are drafting Lorehold, pay attention to your sort of lesson board, because I think the mistake possibly, I see a lot of people play against me, and they'll lead with like a turn 2 Professor in Symbology, and the best thing they can find is like 2 mana, find a land, gain 2 life. And so you obviously don't really want that if you're trying to aggro me out, but they obviously weren't paying attention to their wish board while drafting.
Yeah.
So if you are trying to go red white, I think more so than any other color combination, really pay attention to making sure you have like a good 3 or 4 lessons to learn.
Yeah, like you definitely want a couple of the creature ones, like ideally the Inkling Summoning.
And
then I think one of the best ones for Lorehold is Expanded Anatomy, where you just like stick some counters on my guy, give it Vigilance, make a thing like I can attack when you thought I might not be able to.
Did you see the Twitter thread that someone scraped all the data from 17 Lands about lessons and learning spells?
No, I have not seen that.
So it's quite interesting. So I think expanded anatomy. So basically, it was a very linear, like the more lessons and the more more individual lessons and the more learn spells you have. Basically, like a linear graph of both of those. Like you're more likely to win. So basically, it's good to have a lot of lessons to learn and a lot of cards that find them. But also, I think the one that had the best win rate when found. Was a mythic, the menagerie, whatever it is, mascot exhibition. Like fair enough, whatever. But then I think the common that had the highest win rate when found was the one you were just saying that like just hit you for an extra, like bash up my creature and hit you for an extra 2.
Yeah.
But I think people might take that the wrong way to say that's the best one. But what it actually means is you only find that one when you're already winning the game, and it helps you win the game a bit more. Yeah. So if you're losing the game, you're just never going to find that one, and so. The stats make it look like that's the best card, but what it actually means is that's the best card to find if you're already winning the game.
Yeah, if you're slightly ahead, this will help you go further ahead.
Yeah.
But if you're not slightly ahead, this one essentially doesn't really do anything.
Yeah. So like I was saying earlier, the lesson cards I think it's better to have versatile ones than it is to have linear ones. So like if you have nothing else in the pack to pick, then sure, take an expanded anatomy. But I think for the most part, pretty much any of the sort of the creature summoning ones, or even just like a random disenchant, you might be better off taking that over an expanded anatomy. Or even I think the find a land one I think is probably the best one to have, like just as a one-off in your board, because sometimes you do just get mana screwed, and it's great to just go like find that and get back in the game.
LSB was saying that's easily the best. It's the one you want first, like before all the others.
Yeah, I do agree, because it's the only one that has a very unique effect. I think there's a lot that's like, oh, it's just another creature, whatever, it's just another removal, whatever. That's the only one that's like, this is the only one that will stop you just getting horrendously screwed out of the game.
Yeah.
Even though it's not that powerful and you probably won't find it all the time, you need it to find the times that you really need it.
Yeah, very much so.
So yeah, I guess overall summary of Lorehold, what do we say? Not nice, interesting, but I think could do with a bit more support to be really competitive, I think. Would you say that's a fair
I think
summary?
It's more to do with like, it's really interesting that they've managed to make it so it can be grindy and what have you, but because they also have that, what you've ended up doing is weakening the I'm going to beat you up quick, because I've now got these cards like Quintorius and this 5/5 Vigilance Menace that like don't actually try and get you dead quick there, and like Lorehold Expansion, which are just like slow grindy cards, when usually in a normal set they'd be like...
Do you mean Excavation, Lorehold Excavation?
Yeah, sorry, Lorehold Excavation.
Yeah, the enchantment, yeah.
Which in like a set where they were just going, red and white want to beat you up, it'd be like, all right, mill a card, and if you mill a creature card, you get a 2/2. Rather than, or if you mill a land, they'd take 1, and like you gain 1 or whatever. If not, they take 1, and then you can pay 5 to make a tapped 3/2.
Yeah. That card gets a lot better when you do have a Quintorius Field Historian in play, I will add, because obviously you then make 2 3/2s with each one.
Yeah.
And I think one of them's not tapped as well, because the enchantment makes them tapped, doesn't it? Whereas Quintorius doesn't.
Like he's really he's the card that really makes it so that you can go long and grindy, because you're just like, just make these 3/2s, and then if you don't deal with him, actually.
One other thing actually I will say about Lorehold is really pay attention to what all your cards do, because something I've noticed a few times is like random synergies that I didn't realize I had when doing it. So like or my opponent will have a Fuming Effigy in play, and just like a card, like you Gravedigger a card, or you remove a card from your graveyard, and suddenly if someone gets pinged for one, it's like, I kind of forgot that was there, because it triggers on a lot different. So some of them like only trigger on exile, but some of them trigger on leaving the graveyard, which I don't know if that was an intentional design point, or if they just didn't really think too much about it. I guess it must have been intentional, but it is weird that some of them synergize with other like abilities. Like there's a lot of stuff in like other guilds that, not guilds, what they call schools, that like bring stuff back from your graveyard, for example, but not a lot of other stuff that exiles cards. Or like I think one of them I had was the Mind Rot, I can't remember the name, that then exiles the graveyard. So it's like that will randomly trigger Fuming Effigy if you do it on your so if your opponent has a Fuming Effigy, make sure you don't just randomly take damage from it.
Yeah.
And so if someone
you will
does
only
it to
take
you,
1 from it, But the other card is
Yeah.
like Rise of Extus, also exiles a card from the graveyard. So that might randomly trigger one of the low hold cards.
Yeah, exactly. So keep an eye on these things. And like when people do it to you, so like I guess if you're playing in real life, it's more relevant. But like if you have a Quintorius and someone Rise of Extus you just get a 3/2 out of it, which someone has done to me before because people obviously just don't realize.
Yeah.
So it does have all these like weird incidental synergies that you don't necessarily notice at first glance.
Yeah.
We didn't discuss the structure of this too much, but we should probably do like top and like best and worst cards. Just kind of off the top of your head. I don't know if you're able to do that. I think basically I think anything that is based on what we've discussed, anything that's like relatively cheap but gets you card advantages good. So like in the commons,
Guiding Voice is just great. It's just like put a counter on something early and learn.
I agree. So I'd have that. I'd have Pilgrim of the Ages as well, another really good common. Just like kind of like the like I was saying, the lesson card that finds a land. Like it just get you out of a horrendous man screw. Like sometimes Pilgrim of the Ages doesn't do a whole lot, but it's rarely bad. Like you never don't want it and you're there.
I was gonna say that's the thing. It's not doing anything great, but it turns out it gets you your fourth land. So like
yeah,
if you've got a Pilgrim of the Ages, like if you can literally just be like, oh, play a creature and you're like, play the red uncommon learn card on it so it has to block just so I can get my lesson that lets me go and get a land. That's my third land. Play my Pilgrim, that gets me my fourth land. Oh look, I'm just like, I can cast everything now.
Yeah. I think on the flip side of that, maybe I think Illustrious Historian is a card that's disappointed me because it looks like it's going to be really good. So it's a 2-mana 2/1 that you can then exile to get a 3/2 from your graveyard. I think only because it feels like it's card advantage, but by the time you're getting to 5 mana, you've probably got better things to be doing.
Yeah.
I rarely am just happily getting like a 3/2 on turn 5.
You really need to be taking advantage of a card leaving your graveyard.
Yeah.
Additionally to, like, obviously it's great to just make a 3/2 in the late game, but like what you really want to be doing is like making a 3/2 and putting a +1/+1 count on the uncommon dog, or making a 3/2 with Quintorius, or pinging them for 1 with Fuming Effigy, and like, you want to be doing stuff like that.
Interesting. So on the uncommons, the dog you just mentioned, the 1-mana dog, I really don't like that. I think people play it too willingly.
Yeah, I think that's not very good. But
yeah, I think it's cute when you can trigger it a few times, but like you're rarely going to trigger it before like turn 4 or 5 realistically. And even then you might get like a 3/3 or a 4/4 out of it. Like, okay, great. Like the value of it being a 1/1 that's a 1-mana card that's a 4/4 isn't that amazing when it's like now turn 6. So I think people just need to, like, you can have a really good red-white deck with a bunch of Graveyard Synergy and just not play your Stonebinder's Familiar, I think.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that, so the best uncommons, I think the one that you basically always pick when you see it, I think, is Ignis Inspiration. Like, it's just very rarely bad.
Yeah.
Similarly, the forgotten name, but Professor of Symbology, the 2-mana 2/1, like I said earlier, just like
that card's really good,
just solid. Yeah, it's just like it's never going to win a game by itself, but it's also pretty much always good because you can basically always cast a 2-drop. Quintorius with the right cards is like ridiculous. Like, it's worth picking early, I think, and then drafting around it.
Yeah, very much so.
Just because of like how ridiculous it can be when it takes over the game. Not being too impressed by Dueling Coach. That's one that puts +1/+1 counts on creatures. It feels like it's in the wrong colours.
It turns out it's just like so much mana. Yeah, because like even in the black-white decks that we'll get to later on that want the counters, it's just so hard to set up to do actually anything.
Yeah. And finally, I really like Ardent Dust Speaker as well. So that's a 5-mana 3/4.
That goes really late in all of the drafts that I see.
I've noticed that as well. People don't seem to be picking. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I'm not sure why either. So I've got really itching today.
Even if your opponent blocks it, you can still technically get a 2-for-1 off it. And if they don't manage to kill it the first turn, it's just like generates so much card advantage over the course of the game while triggering your other red-white card. So yeah, it's definitely worth picking Ardent Dust Speaker. I do like it. It's quite hard to... It's just a scary prospect to play against. Like when your opponent untaps with it, it's like, oh no, what's about to happen to me?
Lowhold, I can't remember who mentioned it, but like gets access to like the 3, what I essentially think of as main mascot summoning spells. It gets like Inkling Summoning and Spirit Summoning and elemental summoning.
Yeah, I said that earlier. I think it's the only school that gets you all of those three. I think they're the three sort of most solid ones.
Yeah.
All right, should we move on to the blue-red school?
Well, this is the one you'll be talking about.
Yeah, so the Prismari's motto is...
Coventry University.
These students' spells are spectacles of raw creativity or meticulous artistic expressions. All the world's a stage, and whether informed by mind or emotion, Prismari always leave a lasting impression. Did you do that promo, like what school are you quiz when it was released? So I did, and Prismari is unsurprisingly, I think, the school that I got. Traditionally, I have always liked blue-red decks, just in any constructed format. Blue-red-whites, like Jeskai, has always been my favourite colour combination, so I'm not surprised that I have only been pretty much mono-drafting Prismari. I think I actually prefer... Well, Quandrix is next, so I'll enjoy it more. I actually think I now prefer Quandrix now. I've got quite a few drafts done, but Prismari is definitely up there for me. Unlike Lorehold, though, it does exactly what you'd expect blue-red to do, right? It's just like burn spell, card draw. It's just spell-based, essentially.
Yeah. One of the first questions I want to ask you about this is, what do you think of Prismari Apprentice?
Is this the 2-mana unblockable
It's the 2-mana 2/2 that's unblockable when you cast an instant or sorcery, and it's got mana value 5 or more. It gets a +1/+1 counter.
I like it. I do like it. I think it's more disappointing than you'd expect from the sort of the center point blue-red uncommon creature of the set. Like, often I'd maybe rather just have a Prismari Pledge Mage.
Yeah.
Because the blue-red deck...
Because it blocks better.
Yeah, exactly. It blocks better. The blue-red deck's basically win in the late game. Like, if you're getting to the point where you're regularly casting 5-mana spells, the fact that you have a 3/3 unblockable, probably not that relevant. So it is good. Like, it's definitely good, and I would never cut it from a blue-red deck. Is there a reason you ask?
Because when you were saying, like, it does exactly, like, the blue-red cards do exactly what you expect, that card sort of doesn't, for me, because it's sort of like, it sort of, like, goes, oh, look, I am doing what this deck wants to, because I get a +1/+1 counter when you cast a 5 casting cost spell. So obviously one of the Prismari things is casting, like, making their instant sorceries cost less and having 7, like, make 2 4/4s or deal 5 damage and look at the top 6 cards and etc. etc. But, like, it also feels like it's not really what it's doing, because it's attacking for 2, and getting them dead isn't what you're necessarily aiming to do in a deck that wants to play 7 casting cost big spells as much.
I do agree. What do you think of Storm Kiln Artist, the 4-mana 2/2 that makes treasures?
He's been surprisingly good. I'm currently really high on him because I had, like, a really fun win in my sealed with him, but that was completely, like, very different. But, like, I found him. The problem is, like, he obviously just gets plus power, so he just gets killed off really easily. But what you can do is just make you a bunch of treasures so you can cast, like, a lot of spells and get to your big spells.
I think that I really like it. The reason I mention it is that often I pick it over the 2-drop. Just because I think that does do exactly what you want the decks to do, because you have I always end up with a bunch of card draw in my hand and not enough mana or time to cast it. Whereas that lets you, obviously, like, all your spells essentially cost 1 less because they add your mana for the next spell.
Yeah.
And he'll often just trade for, like, a random 5/5 fractal. So he'll, like, make you some treasures, block and kill a big monster, and it's like that's exactly what you want the deck to do. Whereas, often you've got a 2-drop unblockable. It's like, well, I don't actually want that right now.
Yeah, I don't want to be attacking necessarily, and it doesn't actually trade up very well, and this and the other.
So I do really, I do. I think I prefer the red uncommon to the blue red uncommon a lot of time. I don't know if he's necessarily better. It really depends on the deck. I don't want to, go on record as saying that Prismari Apprentice isn't good. But I do agree with you that it's not quite in theme with what the deck generally wants to do.
I think Prismari have my favourite common in the set as well.
What's that? The
blue-red sorcery where it's like, look at the top 3 cards, put one in your hand, exile one and you can play it this turn, and put
Expressive Iteration.
Yeah.
The reason you like it so much is probably it's actually an uncommon. It's not a common.
Is it? Are you sure?
Yeah, it's definitely uncommon.
Oh, all right then. Yeah. Well, I love that. That card's just great.
Yeah,
I thought it was common. I think I thought it was common because I've had 2 decks that have had 3 in them.
What would you say the frequency is of you finding a land versus a spell as the card you play this turn?
Very, very high.
Yeah.
This is
as
a turn
more
3
lands
play.
and spells. Yeah.
This is a turn 3 play where you go, all right, let's put a land there. I'll take a spell for later, put something back in, play my land for the turn. Next turn, do the same, play another 2-drop, off we go.
Yeah, because in my mind, like, it might as well just say find a land in the top 3 cards and put it into play, draw a card.
It's one, like, obviously it's when you cast it later in the game, you're like, oh man, I'll just put the land back in my library, get a spell. But
90% of the time for me, it's just a eureka moment that costs 2, which is obviously a very good thing to have. Because it's draw 2 cards, one of them's a land, put it straight into play. So yeah, I do agree that card's really good. It's good that it's a cheap spell. So what blue-red wants, I think, what you want from this deck is a couple of Prismari Pledge Mages, and then just a bunch of like either really cheap spells or really expensive spells. So you spend the first few turns just like surviving, drawing cards, and then you spend the end game just like making Haymaker spell after Haymaker spell, like make 2/4 elementals, or like blast you creature with 5 impulse. And so yeah, cards like we said earlier, cards like Pledge Mage often are just better than Apprentice because it's got 1 more power and 1 more toughness, and it blocks better in the early game.
Yeah,
and you're not too worried about attacking right away. But yeah, I do like Prismari, unsurprisingly, and I do have quite a good win record with it.
I should probably try drafting it more because I do enjoy it.
It is really good.
It does the stuff I sort of want to.
What have you thought of Maelstrom Muse? This is a 4-mana 2/4 flying.
Is it like, obviously the aim of Maelstrom Muse is that you play it on turn 4, they don't kill it, you attack, and then you get to play one of your 7 casting cost spells. I've not had that happen very often. Although
yeah, I found that too.
I've also annoyed, like, this is obviously entirely my own fault, but like, annoyingly, what it does is give you a discount on your next spell, not add mana that you can spend on instants and sorceries. Because what you can't do is knock 1 mana off one spell and 1 mana off another spell.
Yeah.
Because I had 2, like, I think he had like a Prismari Command and some other spell that was like, it might have been a Spirit Summoning, and I was like, oh, I can play both of those, and it's like, no, you can't, because you actually only get a discount on one of them.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's the dream is to cast a master spell on turn 5, but realistically, more often I just get like a 1 mana pop quiz or whatever, like which like
is
a cheap
fine.
spell that's slightly cheap. It's still fine, yeah, but he's not been as amazing as I thought it would be when I keep saying he. I don't know if it even has a gender, but
the other thing is, it's like
hard to tell.
You can't. There's not really loads of stuff to boost its power, so it is more often than not just going to reduce the cost by 2. And the other thing is, because it's like there's not that many spells where you want to take more than 2 off the casting cost necessarily. There's like the big a red and 7 spell that it'd be great to get a huge discount on. But
Explosive Welcome, yeah. So in summary, I really like Prismari. What are the best commons? Heated Debate is a really good one. I mean, we didn't mention that for Lorehold, but I think Heated Debate is just obviously a good red common. But I think it's better in Prismari than is Lorehold because it's kills anything instant speed. It's a more defensive card.
The thing is, it's just one of those cards that doesn't really need talking about. It's like the Signpost red removal spell, so it's like all of the red universities want to play it.
There's a nice bit of flavour in there, in that it can't be countered, which is most of the time irrelevant. But basically, my opponent tried to counter it and couldn't because it says on it can't be countered, because you don't really consider that. But I like the idea of it's wordplay because it's a heated debate, and you can't counter your opponent's argument because their debate is so heated.
Yeah,
I quite liked when that happened to me. I was like, oh yeah, I also didn't know it can't be countered. That makes sense. So yeah, that's an obvious one. In terms of other commons, I keep saying that Prismari Pledge Mage, I think basically pick these up to the 3rd one. I think you basically just pick these when you see them. Spectral Mage I've been less keen on than I thought I'd be, and similarly, this really hurts me to say it about a flying mana war, but Frost Trickster is not being that good for me. I think mostly just because it's not a spell.
See, I was going to say, I think that's because it's a Quandrix card more than a thingy. Because, it's amazing in Quandrix, which we'll get onto next, because you just, make a massive fractal, tap your guy in.
Bash, bash, bash.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think Frost Trickster's that kind of card is a very tempo card, so it's better when you're on the aggressive, and Prismari is often not on the aggressive.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not that good. Cards that I think have impressed me more than I thought they would. I really like Burying Books.
That card is really good. It's really annoying. Yeah.
I really like Serpentine Curve. That's possibly more of a Quandrix card as well, but I do really like Serpentine Curve. Even if it's just like a 4-mana 3/3, it's fine. But then in the late game, you just randomly draw a 4-mana 8/8, and it's like, oh great, yeah. My red-blue deck generally wouldn't have that kind of monster.
Yeah.
So I do really like that. I really don't like Tome Shredder, the dog that exiles cards to get bigger.
I thought that was going to be better in both Prismari and Lawhold. But it turns out in Lawhold, it doesn't. Again, it's one it doesn't win the control-y version, and it has a tap ability. So it has haste.
You can't
and
attack with it,
but you can't attack with it and make it bigger.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really do what Prismari's after. I suppose it's all right in that it can block as a 3/3 immediately and then slowly build up, but it's sort of not what you want to be doing.
Yeah, there's some occasionally. So I actually didn't realize this because I initially thought I'll never put this in a deck because Serpentine Curve doesn't want to lose cards, but I think that actually it counts cards in exile as well, so it doesn't actually play against that.
Yeah.
But there are occasionally I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there are occasionally other cards that care about bring cards back from your graveyard or whatever, or other things that want to remove cards from your graveyard.
Yeah.
And so it's I just don't think it plays very well with other cards in the in the theme. Just random Pillar Drop Warden occasionally. It's not, I don't think it's a great card, but occasionally you'll have it in your deck and you want to return something I can't because I exiled it with Tome Shredder earlier.
Yeah.
Pigment Storm I think is really good. Possibly better in a more aggressive deck, but it's still just really good. Just a 5-mana basically kill anything. It's rare that
it kills
you can't find something good to kill. Yeah. What do you think of Teach by Example, just before we move on? That's probably the last one I'll mention.
I started off thinking it was rubbish, and I've definitely come round on it. I think it's...
I'm the opposite. I started trying to make it work in every deck, and I ended up just cutting it because it can never make it work. It's often sometimes it's great when you get a double draw spell, double removal spell or whatever, but then so many times I just draw it on an empty hand. It's I lose because of this. Literally any other spell would have been fine.
Yeah. The important thing to remember is it's not a fork. It is a cast it and then, because both me and an opponent have done it where we're cast a spell. Well, luckily I cast my spell, then went to get my Teach by Example, and I was oh, this is the next one you play, so this doesn't work how I wanted it to. So I didn't cast it, but then my opponent was oh, heated debate. When that's on the stack, cast Teach by Example. Yeah. And I was you're an old school player like me, but it turns out you've just discarded a card for 2.
Yeah, I've never seen or done that. I think I'm aware of what it does. Actually, the last one I really like is Quandrix Blade Mage. It doesn't feel like a Prismari card because obviously it says Quandrix, but it's also you can cast it for 1 blue, and sometimes it's just a massive monster. It's really hard to deal with if your opponent doesn't kill it immediately.
Yeah.
Any star uncommons? I think we actually mentioned most of the good uncommons already.
Yeah, the card that I thought was common but is uncommon. One.
Practical Research I think has been disappointing for me. When I saw a 5-mana instant draw 4 cards, I was yes, I'll put that in every deck, but often because it doesn't affect the board, there's no removal to win, it's just about expensive enough that matters. Often I'd rather just be casting a Pigment Storm. So it's not. I'm not being that impressed with Practical Research. Often I'd just rather have a Pop Quiz or even a Curate, just because they're they
cheaper.
They're cheaper. Then they're not card advantage. Well, Pop Quiz is, but Curate's not card advantage, but it's still card filtering, and it's just much cheaper.
Yeah.
All right, Quandrix is next. If you're ready to move on.
Yes, I think this is the best university.
I agree, but I'll just read their statement. Quandrix mages are ingenious math magicians Or are they, as we've debated on the podcast before, because a lot of their math doesn't make sense. They study patterns, fractals, and symmetries to command power over the fundamental forces of nature. They can simultaneously contemplate the metaphysical properties of the universe while reciting every number of pi backwards, which, as we know, is impossible because pi is repeating forever. It never stops. At what point do you stop and start counting backwards? Yeah, so I agree. I'll let you go ahead because I'm doing a lot of talking so far, but I agree that it's the best one.
Yeah, well, it's just ramp and big spells. What's not fun about it? And it turns out like it's just got such. I think it's just like Professor of Zoomancy is just a super solid, common, like big creature. And like I said, I think Frost Trickster goes really well in this deck. And then Field Trip getting you fractal summonings for later in the game and just ramping you up. It's just like, I find it really strange that people don't seem to like Eureka Moment, because I love it.
Oh yeah, I get past those really late and I don't get it.
Yeah.
Because it is really good.
And Leyline Invocation being much better than I expected it to be. Just like, it turns out just like turn 5, 6 6s and then 7 7s and 8 8s is just like actually rough to deal with. Because like we said, like Pigment Storm kills most things, but it turns out there's only like what is it? It's called Mage Hunter's Onslaught. It's like the only proper sub 6 casting cost removal spell for anything. Like, so the Leyline Invocation just actually makes something that's very difficult to remove.
Yeah.
And then like the other common one's Rise of Extus. But like I said, that's like
you mean
6.
common, right? Yeah, because there is other stuff that gets rid of them.
Yeah, sorry, it's common. It's like it's very
I
interesting.
agree. I think I was actually trying to think before we started, like what makes Quandrix better than Prismari for me, and I think because they're very similar, they both have this like lots of ways generated card advantage, lots of ways like winning the late game. But I think the benefit that Quandrix has is it doesn't sacrifice the early game in the process. So it has all these like so instead of like, whereas Prismari is just playing a pop quiz to draw 2 cards, in Quandrix you're like, is it Field Expedition that you're finding a land, Field Trip, you're finding it, you're ramping yourself while learning, so you're like affecting the board a bit, and you've got like all these good 2-drops. You've got Mage Duel, which lets you go like turn 3, turn 2, just make a random 2-drop, either just a random 2-drop or like a premium, one of the premium uncommons, like the I forgot the name, Quandrix Apprentice, the one that finds lands when you cast a spell. So you go like turn 2 Quandrix Apprentice, turn 3 like Curate Mage Duel, and you're just like so far ahead at that point. You've just drawn 2 extra cards, your opponent's got no monsters, you're tackling them for 3. You got Biomathematician, which is like a really premium common, but it's like Quandrix I think has so many like solid cards that often I just cut the Biomathematicians because they just don't like work with my deck, which is really weird to think because it's 3 mana for 3 power and 3 toughness at common that also has other like random synergies because it pumps all your fractals. And so I think blue green, like I said, it's as much power as Prismari in the late game, but way more power in the early game as well.
It's interesting. I think part of the thing is, it was interesting when you were saying about like Pop Quiz and what have you, and like Field Trip is. Pop Quiz is not rubbish, but like I said, doesn't do anything on the board early, whereas Field Trip is like, they both learn and they both essentially draw a card. It's just that Field Trip, the card you draw is a forest and it goes straight into play, whereas Pop Quiz just draws you a random card. Whereas later in the game, obviously, Pop Quiz is like slightly better because you would rather have just a random card than definitely a forest that goes into play. But like the difference in those 2 commons, and the funny thing is, obviously, Quandrix gets both of them. But like the power of those early, the power difference in those early is like quite significant, I think. And then like obviously I love the Quandrix Cultivator, which is like a 3/4 that goes and gets your land and puts that into play as well.
It's so good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like 4 mana 3/4 is just quite big anyway. Like it's so hard to attack into.
Yeah.
And there's just like card advantage / card fit, like almost mana fixing, because you do sometimes get like mana intensive cards. Another good thing I think about Quandrix, it lets you splash another color really easy. So like I was saying earlier, a lot of my decks are like blue, red, green, not just blue, green, or just blue, red.
Yeah.
And like blue, black, green, like blue, green with a splash of black just for removal is another good one. Because I think the weakness of Quandrix, perhaps it doesn't have that much removal. If you don't pick up mage duels, you have very few ways of like decisively killing a monster. Like there's burying books get you so far, but sometimes you just lose to a random monster.
Yeah. And then you've got like also from the Mystical Archive, you've got Cultivate as well. There's another way to ramp in green.
Yeah, we haven't actually mentioned the Mystical Archive cards. Something we should talk about. Let's take a quick break from the schools to talk about. How do you feel about those?
At first, I thought I was going to not like that they were there, but it turns out the more I play them, I'm like, actually, it's like quite interesting to have them there. But
yeah, they have. I still don't. They have grown on me, but I still wish they hadn't been there. There's something about them that feels off, and it's for the most part I think they're fine, but then there is like this random swing in power level where you punch like randomly swords to plowshares here, and it's like, well, why is that here? That doesn't need to be here.
It's quite funny, like I did a sealed last night and it had like lightning bolt and shock, and I'm like what? Like so sometimes I just get a card that's 33% worse than the other.
Yeah, because they're also both Mystical Archive cards. I think it'd be less weird if Shock was like in the set.
Yeah.
But they're both Mystical Archive cards, and I do find that it does feel like, because I think I initially said on the podcast that it seems like they just chuck cards in at random without really thinking about synergies. But now that I've played it more, I realise that a lot of the Mystical Archive cards are like they could be in one of the schools if they hadn't already been printed. If that makes sense, like they sort of do fit with the school. But then you do get just random stuff like that. It's like, all right, I get it. Prismari is blue-red and it casts spells that like burn spells, but did you really need to include Shock and Lightning Bolt? It is quite weird, isn't it?
Yeah, like I said, I was doing that seal last night, and I'm like, well, I'm obviously got to play both of them, but like every time I draw the Shock, I'm going to be like, well, this doesn't deal 3 damage, like the other Mystical Archive card that I have and just does.
Yeah.
And then like there's just some cards that are a bit random and just like have a lot of power that there's just like, oh yeah, it turns out there's 2 extra Wraths in the set that people can get. Is it just 2? Like I know there's Day of Judgment and
there's Crux of Fate as well.
But is there another, like I don't even know what all the Mystical Archive cards are.
I think they're the only 2 Mystical Archive Wrath. There are a couple of like other Wraths in the set as well.
Yeah.
There's that 8 mana black one.
There's Culling Ritual, there's the 8 mana black one, there's the Planar Cleansing.
Mastery. Yeah, the White Mastery. But yeah, no, I'm not that keen on Mystical Archive cards, but they have grown on me. I think now that I know what most of them are, so I'm less surprised when my opponent randomly Lightning Bolts something or like randomly Snakeskin Veil something. Like now that I know what they are for the most part, they're less annoying. But yeah, I'm still not. I wish they hadn't done them really. But to summarize Quandrix, great. Not much bad to say.
Yeah, it ramps, it draws cards. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of saying
things
like
that go together really well.
Exactly, yeah. In terms of saying the worst cards in it, I'm actually not sure there are that many bad cards in Quandrix that are specifically Quandrix cards. Like, I think cards like Bayou Groff are played way too often online, but that's more of a black-green card, isn't it? Like, you can play it in Quandrix, obviously. I just don't think there are any commons that are, like, obviously not that... I don't know if I'm saying that very well. I don't think there are any trap commons in this, whereas there are in other colours. Like, it's the bad ones are obviously bad, I think. And I think that's partly why Quandrix is so good, because most of its cards are just really good. And they all, like, work well together. So, yeah, draft Quandrix, basically. If you can draft Quandrix, draft Quandrix. If you can splash removal, even better.
Even better.
Cool. Should we move on to Silver Quill? The black-white one.
Okay.
Wielding the magic of words, Silver Quill students are stylish, intimidating, and tirelessly competitive. These mages are born leaders with razor-sharp wit and natural charisma that can be used for good or for ill. There's the black-white theme there, I guess, the good and the evil.
Yeah.
Silver Quill, to me, is the most non-school in that, like, I can. If you ask me what all the school's themes were, I could answer that really easily. So, like, blue, red's like spells, card draw, burn spells, like flyers, that kind of thing. Quandrix, like we said, like ramp, card draw, like big late game. Lore holders, these cool, like, grindy synergies. But Silver Quill, like, what is... honestly don't know what Silver Quill's thing is.
It turns out this is the aggro deck in the format. This is what...
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
okay.
it turns out I've been getting battered by Silver Quill recently. My last few drafts, I've just been like... People have been like, all right, make some little monsters, put +1/+1 counters on them, beat you up. Like...
Okay.
Play Eye Twitch or Unwilling Ingredient, play some 2-drop, play another 2-drop, leave up Professor's Warning... Just get you.
Yeah, because all these cards you're saying to me don't sound very good. So I'll say now, Silver Quill I think is the worst in the set.
Yep, and what's going to happen is you're going to get rolled by them because...
Well, exactly. I don't know if that, because I often do lose to it as well. But I never get in a draft where it's like I see cards in it and think this is open, I should draft it. But I think it's because all the cards are relatively weak compared to, say, Quandrix.
Well, that's because it's the aggressive deck of the format.
So I don't think to start picking them because I see like a really flashy card in another guild, another school, and think, well, I'll just pick that and roll with that. But then I do just get steamrolled by like random, like, oh, give my guy +2/+2 and lifelink. Do you have a removal spell? No, okay, you're dead then.
Yeah, it turns out like I've actually had some success with it, and it turns out, yeah, +2/+2 and lifelink for a turn. Just like it's like, all right, yeah, that means my Prismari Pledge Mage can't block your random 2/2, and
yeah, I also can't burn it out anymore with this 3-mana burn spell.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's
and then
so I haven't really...
Study Break goes much better into this than it does into Lore Hold. It's just like, oh, right, tap your guy down, my 3/1 gets in, give you some business.
So I had exactly that. So I was like playing against a Silver Quill deck with like the most stupidly powerful, grindy blue-red-green deck ever. And I was just sat there thinking, like, I've drawn 20 more cards than you. You've got no creatures on the board. Like, there's like, it's just, when you have those games where I just can't lose this.
Yeah.
And then they just randomly go like, Study Break into Study Break, play these Inkling summonings, like slowly ping away your life for 2 turns, and then I'm suddenly dead. I'm like, what? How did that? What? Yeah. I just don't get how that happened. But yeah, like Silver Quill is like annoyingly quick and annoyingly like tempo-y, and it's so against everything that I normally draft. I think it just kind of crept up on me. But having said that, I did then, because I don't really ever draft it, I then did a Silver Quill draft yesterday. I did, because they introduced Quick Draft on the Friday just gone. So we're recording this on a Sunday. They just introduced Quick Draft. And I think I opened a blot out the sky. So I was like, well, obviously I'm going to force Silver Quill now. And then I just like steamrolled my way into a 7/1, like very easy trophy.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that didn't. So it's like, I don't know if I'm ranking it low because it's low power or because I don't like the decks that you get from it.
Well, the thing is, it's like you hated the red-white deck. Yeah, the red-white deck in Kaldheim, and it turns out like that deck was just like an absolute beating.
But I think it's different because with Kaldheim red-white cards, you can look at them and say that is very clearly a good aggro card. Like, I can understand, I don't like the deck, but I can understand why it's good because all these cards are really good. Whereas Silver Quill, I just look at all these random, like, crappy commons. It's like, how are you beating me?
And you're just like,
yeah, exactly.
Well, it turns out, like, you can't actually ping things very easily. So them being 3/1s and 2/1s, like, doesn't actually matter that much. And then, yeah, they just have... Like, this is another one that, like, really takes advantage of the pump spells. And, like I said, Professor's Warnings just... Oh, my guy gets indestructible, or gets the counter that pushes it past your guy. The 1-drops... Both the 1-drops are evasive, so they take +1/+1 counters really well. And then if you I was going to say if you get either of the uncommons, but it's not the white one. It's the black like if you get the black uncommon, the tenured whatever it's called,
ink something.
Yeah, tenured ink master or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
where you're just like, oh, all my things with +1/+1 counters on now drain you. Oh look, you're actually just very, very dead. And like, this is the deck. Oh, actually, I was going to say this is the deck more than With a Bloom that takes advantage of Mage Hunter's Onslaught. But that's not the case. But like, both of them, like, it turns out whenever a creature blocks this turn, its controller loses 1 life is actually very relevant. Can actually be very relevant Because you're just like, oh, actually, I'll just swing with everything, and it doesn't matter because you're just dead.
Yeah, that card is good. I think that just removal in general, I think one of the benefits, I think, of being in Silver Quill is you get access to a lot of the removal that while other people are fighting over Quandrix or Prismari, they obviously don't care about the black removal. So you have like the premium stuff like Closing Statement, which is just like obviously good. And there's a couple of like sort of good uncommon removal cells in the
Mystical Archive
cards. Yeah. So you got like Eliminate, you've got I was gonna say you got Despark, but having played that recently, it was less good than I thought because often your opponent's big monster costs 0 because it's a fractal, so you can't actually despark it.
Despark's actually not as good as I originally thought. I think Eliminate's probably better than Despark.
Yeah, because it kills anything up to 3 and then also massive fractals.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think Silver Quill, I think begrudging. I think we said we're going to rank.
It still feels like it's the worst, but that's probably something to do with how we both like playing the game.
Yeah, so we are going to rank the scores at the end of all this, and I've been changing my mind. The more we talk about all of them, I've been changing my mind as we go. So like what I thought my top 5 was at the start of this conversation might have changed by the end. And as we're talking about Silver Quill, like I kind of want it to be bottom, but should it be? That's the thing. I don't know if it should be, but I don't know. We'll see.
It's also whether I'm being like swung by what's gone on recently, whereas like. At the start, I just didn't care about Silver Quill, and then recently I've been getting battered by it. And it's like, is it because it's underdrafted? So what's happening is when you play against a Silver Quill deck, it's actually really good.
Yeah.
Because it's just open, and it turns out any deck with 3 closing statements is going to be rough.
Yeah. All right then, best and worst cards, we've spoken about most of them already. Like any of the removals are good, I think, apart from Despark. So things like Flunk is really good. You've got all these like relatively cheap removal spells. Lash of Malice is another really good one.
Yeah.
Just like push through stuff early.
Because you want to be aggressive, Lash of Malice is actually better than it seems, because you just want to kill their early things to get a bunch of damage in, and then you just sort of like use Study Break and the Pledge Mage so it gains flying, so it's got evasion, or like I said, the Tenured Ink Caster so that you've got some like a little bit of reach to finish people off.
Yeah. Owlin Shield Mage is a card I've been really impressed by. It's a 5 mana 3/3 flying. It's just the ward 3 life is like very annoying to deal with, just because this deck has likely gotten a lot of damage in by turn 5. Like their whole thing is like chip away early damage, and so by the time they've got a 3/3 flying, you're like, I could kill it, but it'll put me on 4 life.
And the absolute beast is when they try and kill it, and you've got like the Professor's Warning. You're like, oh, actually, it's indestructible. And then you're like, oh, I literally cannot target that now.
Yeah, common I'm less keen on is Spiteful Squad. I've never been that impressed by that, but I see a lot of people playing against me, and oftentimes it's like, sure, it's a 2/2, I'm not too bothered.
Yeah.
Rise of Exodus, I think it's just always solid, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah, that's just.
It's always good to be able to kill something big. And in terms of uncommons, I think, like you said, Tenured Inkcast is a really good one. Really bad one, Shadewing Laureate. So this is the sort of there's like a cycle of these in every.
It's not bad.
Colour.
It just doesn't. It sort of ends up
it's
not doing
as good
anything
as you want it to be. Yeah. So when you compare it to like Quandrix Cultivator, which is the sort of the blue-green version of the cycle, which is just a super powerful card that you'll like happily first pick. This one's basically just a 3 mana 2/2 flying.
Yeah, it's just an awkward to cast. I've never actually seen it trigger. It's an awkward to cast Windrake because if they can kill any of your creatures, they kill that one because it's just a 2/2. And like they're not really trading for your flyers anyway. And like if what you do is play that, and they do have a way of trading for your flyer, they're like, well, I'll not trade for your flyer yet. And then my flyer essentially kills your Laureate, because your Laureate is never going to attack, because you don't want to trade it off, because you won't get any benefit from it. So, like, my flyer sort of killed it anyway. Yeah, so it just all ends up not getting there.
Yeah, I'd say that's one of the weaker uncommons for Black-White. It's fine, but it's not that impressive. It's like you say, it's an awkward Windrake.
Yeah.
All right,
closing statements, obviously great.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, let's close with saying closing statement is obviously good. I've never been. I don't know if because with some cards like we didn't mention. I think Ruther for Prismari is like one of the best uncommons.
Cards like that just don't really need talking about as much. Like I literally used closing statement because you were like, "Let's move on," and I'm like, "Closing statement."
No, but now that you said that, I do want to mention because I was playing on Arena. When you play a spell and you have a Ruther in play, it holds priority automatically.
Yeah.
So you don't, because at the first I was always pressing control, and then once I played as well, I didn't want to copy and it held priority. I was like, I guess I don't need to hold always priority. But for closing statement, I've never tested. I always set a stop in my end step.
No, it works for you.
I've never checked. Oh, does it work? Okay, that's good then. I've never checked.
It turns out if you ever have any of the things, so like if you've got the Mystical Archive thing that copies a card, it always lets you. It always gives you the opportunity to do it. So if you go to the end of your turn and you can cast closing statement, it'll pause.
So if your opponent stops in their end step for no obvious reason, you know they've got closing statement, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's move on to Witherbloom then, the final one. This is black-green, and Witherbloom students draw power from the essence of living beings, whether that means enhancing nature or exploiting it. Witherbloom mages are the most at home riding zombie crocs, picking herbs for potions, and hanging out in their swamp making grim jokes. I think that was a bit weird. Witherbloom, I think, is the
See,
least
this is the one I think
for
this
me.
is the weakest.
Yeah, I think it's between that and Silvercore for me, but I think it's probably this one. I think the thing with Witherbloom is that decks are always either if you get the right cards, it's really good, but you need the right cards. If you don't, it's just a pile of like crap commons and crap uncommons, basically. And it can be hard to. It's the one that needs the most work when building, basically. I think. Whereas like Silvercore, you can just chuck a bunch of monsters and removal in. It's like, well, obviously, it's an aggro deck. With this one, like if you don't have the right cards in the right order, like all the other guilds, all the other schools are doing better things than you are.
Like if you get the right cards and they don't deal like the 2/2 that when you gain life, you put a counter on it, blood. Something or other. See, that card can just be stupid, and I got like absolutely annihilated by one of them last night. But Blood Researcher. But so many of the cards just like they require so much synergy, and it's not just like little 2-card synergies. It's like most of them are a bunch of faffing about.
Yeah, because your synergies, like all the life gain synergy, you obviously want pests, but then if you don't have the payoff cards, pests are just quite bad.
Yeah.
Like they're just random 1/1s, whereas...
And there's not actually that many ways of sacrificing them. Is part of the problem.
So you can end up with either a bunch of pests and nothing to do with them, or a bunch of cards that want pests, but not enough pests to do it. The thing with Blood Researcher, I had this sort of revelation moment a few days ago where I realised that Quandrix Pledge Mage is just better. It's like, even often in the black-green deck, like you're way more likely to trigger your Pledge Mage than you are the Blood Researcher. I know it doesn't have Menace.
But that's the thing, is like you've got this Blood Researcher and you're like, oh, I've got these pets, so when they die I gain a life, and like each pet dying is a separate trigger, so like I'll gain loads. But it's like, but your pests don't die.
Yeah,
because
you have to get yourself in really awkward combat situations to trigger it.
Yeah, it's like, if they attack, they just take one. Like, they'll only attack into you if they need to. If
it benefits them to do so.
And then, like, there's not actually that many ways of sacrificing things. You've got Dina at uncommon, the big Demogoth Woe Eater at common, and the Demogoth Titan at rare. And, like, you've got Tend the Pests, but you don't want to actually sacrifice a pest to tend the pests anyway. It's like all the ways of sacrificing stuff are, like, uncommon or rare. I've literally not seen anybody actually win with a Demogoth Titan in play.
Oh, really? Because I would say that's one of the few cards for me that... Oh, no, sorry, I'm thinking of uncommon. You're talking the rare. I'm thinking Woe Eater.
Yeah, the Woe Eater is actually fine.
The Woe Eater, I think, is actually the only card in the set that makes me want to draft this kind of deck. It's like so powerful.
Yeah.
Just because, like,
the Woe Eater is great because you just sacrifice itself and what have you.
Yeah.
But Demogoth Titan, literally, I've had it in play and it's done. I'm not actually seeing anybody win with it in play. I've seen people win because they've had it in play, and that was me because I had it in play, and then I sacrificed it to Tend the Pest to make 11 tokens and went wide. But like that's some like 2-card rare and uncommon combo.
And even then, it's only good if going wide is like good in that
actually
spot. If your
viable.
opponent's on like 15 life and they have 3 blockers, you're still not going to win from that, are you?
No. But like,
did you see when I posted in our Discord chat that draft where I had 2 Titans in the first 3 picks?
No.
I did.
So yeah.
Yeah, so it was like so brewing something spicy. But then, like I was saying earlier, I thought this is going to be the best deck ever, and I just didn't get any pests. And I ended up only playing one of the Titans in the deck anyway, because like otherwise I've just got all these useless creatures that don't do anything.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. Like, they needed to give you more ways to sacrifice things, or ways to sacrifice things at common. Like, I'm not wrong. There's like literally nothing to sacrifice creatures at common, is there? It's literally Dina, 10 the pests, the uncommon that you sacrifice in your upkeep, the Woe Eater, the Titan that you sacrifice when you're attacking, and then Deadly Brew is the one where both players sacrifice and if you like that card's pretty interesting. But like other than that, there's not actually anywhere to sacrifice your pests. So making all these pests doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
unless
I can
you
answer
can
that question. There's 2 commons that let you sacrifice things, and they're both pretty bad.
Oh, Novice Dissector, that's one of them.
And then Bayou Groff, the plant dog that I said earlier, is pretty unplayable.
See, but that's only like you only get to sacrifice one thing. Like Novice Dissector is the common, and it's like so very average.
It's fine, isn't it?
Yeah. So like you have you can build your deck where you're like, oh, I'll go turn 2 hunt for specimens into pest summoning, and like I've got 3 pests, and it's like, but 1/1s at Game Your Life don't really do anything. So I need to play a blood researcher so I get some benefit from when they die. But then I also need to make something to get rid of them, because like if I attack, my opponent's just going to like take 1, and like they're only going to attack if it's relevant. But the thing is, like if they've got any removal spells, they just kill my thing that benefits from things dying. And I think this is the problem with Witherbloom. Like it just sort of like the cards don't really get there for it, and like all the cards that might be good are uncommon. Like your commons are all a bit naff. Is part of the problem.
I agree. I don't really have much to add to that. I think Witherbloom is definitely the weakest, and it needs a lot of work to make it work, and often it's just not worth it doing that.
Like I said, you can get your big 11-10 Titan, and then you need pests. And like I said, it doesn't help that there's nothing for helping you go wide. So like even if you make a bunch of pests to try and go wide, there's no inspired charge or overrun. Like, Overrun's not even in the Mystical Archive or some sort of Overrun type card, is there?
No, I don't think so. Not that I can think.
No, because like the green mythics are like Primal Command and is it just one mythic in each color? Natural Order, yeah. So it's like, and it's not, and like I suppose you've got Charge Through as the common to give it trample. But it's just one of these things where, like, it's not very easy to give it evasion, so it just gets chumped, and you have to sacrifice. It's like you have to sacrifice as it attacks, and then it's like, or they just push something nonsensical in front of it, and it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, I just feel like Witherbloom just doesn't pay off.
Yeah,
like it's so difficult. Like, I imagine if you get it to work, it's great, but it's just such a faff to actually get it to work. Like, I feel like Brackish Trudge is one of the better ways to benefit from life gain.
That card is quite scary, but equally it comes into play tapped, and often you're just losing, so you just like spend 3 mana, do nothing, you'll go.
Yeah. It's like, because it comes into play tapped, you're then like blocking with your pests to survive, so it untaps, and then you've sacrificed your pests to survive, so you've not got any pests left to gain life later to get it back.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean about it all being, it's all just like slightly too much. It's all just slightly too much work.
Yeah, I essentially agree with everything you said. In terms of best and worst cards, I think we've covered it already. So like Brackish Trudge is really good. The Tenured Inkcaster is really good. Yeah. It's not what's bad, everything else.
It's like...
Professor Zoomancy is a really good card as well.
it's all uncommons. Apart from Professor of Zoomancer, it's like all uncommons because like Biograph's like so average.
Mm. And a lot of the cards you want as well, like all the removal stuff, obviously, you're going to be fighting with other colors. So like Mage Duel, create a removal spell, but all the Quandrix players are going to be scooping that up.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of there's a lot of competition for your actual good cards, and all the cards that are for you only, all the black-green cards, like whatever. You get it late, but it's not very good. Like Witherbloom Pledge Mage actually is a really good one, but again, like
that's actually one of the best Pledge Mages, but like.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the consistent ways of gaining life as well. We keep saying there's no ways of gaining life consistently. Witherbloom Pledge Mage is basically the only one.
Like, it's interesting because Witherbloom Pledge Mage is one of the best ones, and Witherbloom Apprentice is one of the best ones. But then, like, Witherbloom wants to make monsters. It's like you've got this, like the Pledge Mage is like, Magecraft do this, Magecraft do this, and it's like, oh, what are the things you want to do? It's like, make a 7/6, make an 11/10, and make a 4/3 that makes a pest, and like, it's all just like, make a Biogroff, and it's all like, alright, so I've got these, like my Pledge Mage and my Apprentice have got Magecraft, and they don't actually have any spells I want to cast, so I just want to make massive monsters. It's like, what are you doing?
Pest summoning is basically the only one, isn't it, that actually sort of works with those properly?
Yeah.
Because it triggers and then gets pests as well.
Hunt for specimens into pest summoning and stuff like that are great. But again, they're sort of like, they happen before the Witherbloom Pledge Mage comes out. Or like, I suppose they can happen after. Like I said, the Apprentice is really good. And it's really funny that they've both got Magecraft. And it's funny that like I've not actually properly thought about this, like how much it doesn't work. I've just sort of like thought it, and now I've actually gone through it. It's like, actually, yeah, because what you want to do is like, you've got these big, massive monsters that you're trying to get out cheap, and then your Pledge Mage and your Apprentice are Magecraft, and it's like, what? Whereas, like I said, Quandrix Pledge Mage, Prismari, like, they've all got Magecraft, but like, they actually do something, and that's why the Lawhold Apprentice is about naff, because it gives all your spirits a tap ability, but they all have the tap ability they want, which is tap, attack for 3, not tap, deal 1.
I noticed that, because I thought that card was really good the first time I read it, but then I thought it was only spirits. I thought it affected all creatures. Like, oh, why do you want to give your spirits ping? Like it doesn't,
it's not a spirit itself. Even work on itself.
Yeah.
And, like, if it was cumulative, it'd be really good. If it was like, oh, they get, like, deal 1, deal 2, and that'd probably actually be too good. Because you just like cast 3 cheap spells and they start pinging for 3. But yeah, it's funny now that like I've actually vocalized it. That's why Witherbloom is actually naff, because it doesn't
work with itself.
Yeah, it literally doesn't even work with itself. Although I will say Sedgemoor Witch, that card's foolish.
The rare, yeah. It is,
2 and a black for a 3/2 with Menace with Ward 3 and Magecraft whenever you cast Make a Pest. That card's great.
It is, yeah. I've lost to that card a few times. It's annoying because the rest of the deck's really bad. It's like, I'm only losing because you have this one very specific card.
I lost somebody who went Sedgemoor Witch, untap Sedgemoor Witch, and I was like, awful, kill one of them. And they were like, Professor's Warning, it's got indestructibility, make 2 pests. And I'm like,
fun game. Thanks for playing.
Just be dead.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think we've said enough about about this at school, which is basically just don't draft it if you can avoid it.
Turns out, I've already definitely won Matteo over into Silverquill not being the worst with the Bloomers.
All right then, so should we make our closing statement then? Shall we? Let's rank the schools. Well, I think based on what we've said, we'll probably tie in with each other here. But I'm going to go number 1 Quandrix. Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
So blue-green at the top. Number 2, I'm going to put Prismari, blue-red.
Yeah. 3.
I think this is where it gets more difficult. But number 3, I want to put Lawhold.
3. See, I think I'm actually going to put Silverquill 3 because Lawhold is too split amongst itself.
Yeah.
I'm going to put Silverquill because Silverquill actually does its thing.
I'm happy with that. I'm going to keep what I've done, but I'm not. I agree to disagree. I don't think there's anything wrong with putting that there. Number 4, I'm going to put Silverquill, so I'm guessing you're putting Lawhold there.
And then
and then number 5, Witherbloom,
last.
Get in the trash.
Yeah.
Cool. that's us all done then, all wrapped up. Time to the final bell has just gone. Time to
ding ding,
go
home time.
Ding ding, yeah, home time. Thanks if you've watched
quickly. Mike, because the sealed open is next week. One of the things I will say is, don't be afraid of not going to school for the sealed. If it turns out if you have 23 good, like if you've got lots of black and red removal and creatures, that's still a good sealed pool. You don't have to be Silver Quill or something, because like I played Gruul last night. I played red green.
Nice.
7 wins, nice and easy. Yeah. So
yeah, because we haven't really. I did consider whether we should do that. We haven't really mentioned the fact that you can also just not follow schools, but I think for the most part you should, because the set is designed to synergize that way.
I think in draft you're going to more, because you don't want to be missing out on the good gold cards necessarily. But in sealed, because you just get given what you're given, it's very much like, sometimes if you just have, because it's hybrid cards as well, you can just be like, oh, well, it turns out I've actually just got, like I said, I was just like green-red, and it's like, oh, well, it turns out Quandrix Pledge Mage is a green card, and Elemental Summoning is a red card, and Fractal Summoning is a green card, so I can play all of those, and that's fine. And yes, I've got I had like the double face card, the trained Armadon guy. But I'm just like, oh, that's just a trained Armadon. That's fine. I don't have to worry about the blue side. Admittedly, the blue side gave me my favourite win, but...
What was it?
Are you aware of the blue side? What are the double face cards? I can't remember the name of it. It's called Augment a Pugilist, and the back of it is Echoing Equation.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah. Just make everything massive.
I had 4 creatures out, and one of them was a Stormkiln Artist, so I made all my creatures a copy of Stormkiln Artist, and then attacked, and then cast.
I can see where this is going.
+2/+2 on one of my creatures, so I made 4 treasures, so they all get bigger. And then the one that he blocked, I cast Charge Through on it, made 4 more treasures, so they all get bigger. And then it turns out when they're all 10/2s, you just annihilate your opponent.
Get got.
Yeah. That was great fun. Obviously, I only got to cast the blue part because I had the Stormkiln Artist out making treasures for me. And that was funny. But yeah, I was just a green-red deck, and yeah, don't. If that's the way your seal pool goes, don't worry too much about it.
Good advice, I think.
Yeah.
All right, should we close out then?
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. If you're a patron, you might have listened to this, because I will put out the audio version of this. Otherwise, you're probably watching on YouTube. But if you want to consider supporting us on Patreon, we'd very much enjoy it. It's just patreon.com/TPE podcast. All of our socials are the same, Facebook or twitter.com/TPE podcast. And if you're not already in the Discord, then please join it. Head to the website tpepodcast.com, and there'll be a link to do so there, or I'll possibly put it in the show notes down there or something.
Like and subscribe. If you go to Channel Fireball in the affiliate code section, put in TB podcast, that'll confuse somebody.
I don't know what you're talking about, but let's go with that. Thanks everyone for watching. If you made it this far, let us know your thoughts as well. We're always keen to hear people's thoughts. We like it when people reply, because obviously it shows you much to listen. Yeah.
I want to spend, less gems and get more trophies.
My trophy count on 17 lands is I don't know if it's very accurate, because I sometimes play on my phone, so it doesn't track it, obviously, but currently I've got about 1 in 5 trophies, like 1 in 5 events gets to a trophy. But I'll try and improve that for next week.
Check you out.
For the next podcast. All right, yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you for the next set, I guess, and hopefully some drafts between now and then. Bye.
Yep. Bye.